Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantar Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapasha Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyanto ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashyatu. Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we shall continue with the study of Sri Krishna's answer to the question, what is knowledge? And as we have seen in the last two classes, what Krishna is describing are qualities or practices that we need to develop in order to get knowledge, in order to cultivate knowledge, in order for knowledge to manifest in our heart. So he's not answering the question, what is knowledge, directly, but giving us means that lead to knowledge. We know sometimes we refer to the means as the thing itself. For instance, people speak about energy drinks. Now, what we are drinking is not energy per se. Well, it's a drink. But the idea is that some drinks might have some ingredients in them which will release a lot of energy within us. We'll feel more energetic afterwards. So it's almost like, well, have some energy. I remember years ago, when I was in Chennai, in southern India, so at the lunchtime, so in our dining hall, all of us sat down on the ground, cross-legged, and so there used to be a wooden container which had salt. So the general cooking that was done for everyone had minimal salt. Yeah, there was salt, but it was just minimal. And in case anybody needed some extra salt for their taste, so they could then just pull this container and add a little extra salt in their food. So there was one Swami sitting next to me, and then the salt container was on my left-hand side, and he needed some extra salt. So he asked me, could you please pass that salt container? And so I passed it to him. And then before taking that salt in his plate, he just looked at it and then said, this is nothing but blood pressure. Now, I mean, it is said that too much of salt increases one's blood pressure. And so he was fully aware of what putting extra salt in his food might do. So looking at the salt, he just said, this is... Now, it kind of sounds funny, but that was the idea. What he was taking was salt, but he saw that too much of salt could lead to a BP problem. So he said, this is nothing but blood pressure. So again, so this is essentially what's happening here. Krishna is answering the question, what is knowledge? But he's really telling us the qualities which will lead to knowledge. And we saw those qualities beginning with verse 7, and now we have been looking at verse 8. Let me read that verse 8 once again. Indriyartheshu vairagyam anahankara evacha janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha doshanu darshanam. The renunciation of sense objects and also absence of egoism, reflection on the evils of birth, death, old age, sickness, and pain. First two of these we had a chance to reflect on last Sunday. Indriyartheshu vairagyam, developing a sense of detachment from all sense objects. And one of the ways our attachment to sense objects manifests itself is in terms of belonging, that this belongs to me. And it's not only in sense of material objects, that this is mine, but also about our experience. This is my perception, this is my hearing. So our relationship with the sense objects is with this word mine. And then ahankaraha. Ahankara means really the I-making machine. Ahankaraha. And anahankara is the opposite of that. So what Krishna is saying here, in effect, is that the sense of I and mine, the stronger the sense of I, the I that is attached to this body and mind, the I that is attached to the perishable objects of this world, the stronger that sense of I exists, the farther away from knowledge I am. Similarly, the stronger sense of mine, possession, the farther away from knowledge I am. Because as we saw last time, the more we reflect on what is I and what is mine, we see that these are very slippery categories. The more you try to grasp the I, it just slips away. I. Well, what in this is I? Is this the body? Is this the mind? Is this the intellect? And so on. Similarly, mind. So what is mind really? If I just cling on to say, this book is mine, the question would be, well, whose was this book before it came into my possession? This book may outlast me. I will die after some time, but the book probably could last longer, or the book could get destroyed before. Either way, my connection with this book, my relationship with this book is not eternal by any means. And we will therefore see that whatever or whoever we see as mine, that connection, that relationship is good as long as it lasts. But there are so many factors beyond our control that will bring about that separation. And that thing is really being mentioned in the next thing that Krishna mentions here. Janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha dosha anudarshanam. Reflection on the evils of birth, death, old age, sickness, and pain. Now, all of these things are the problems that exist in this world, for which there are no permanent solutions. Yes, there are some quick fixes. Some of these things can be temporarily patched, but not permanently. The word used here is dosha anudarshanam. Dosha, translated in this book as evil, can also mean the defect or faults. Anudarshanam, seeing and reflecting on the faults. Now, this goes completely contrary to the teaching that we should not see the faults of others. We are immediately reminded of what Holy Mother taught, what is often considered her last teaching, said just a few days before her Mahasamadhi, when Mother said, if you want peace of mind, do not see anyone's faults. Now, if you read only this part of the teaching, it might seem as if Mother is saying no fault finding at all. But actually, that's not what she's saying. If you look at this next sentence, do not see anyone's faults, and then Mother says, rather see your own faults. So she's not really saying fault finding is bad in itself. Fault finding can be problematic. Fault finding can lead not only to loss of our peace of mind, but can even take us away from our spiritual path. But it all depends on where that fault finding is directed. Now, if I keep on finding faults with the environment around me, with the people around me, with the places I am in, with the work I have to do, and that's what most of us do most of the time. We are unhappy, we are dissatisfied with the many things in our lives, and we therefore keep on observing their faults, pointing them out, often feeling frustrated about it because we cannot do anything about it other than just call it out and say, this is the problem, that person is the problem, this place is the problem. And we can just go on doing that. Now, that kind of a thing doesn't solve the problem and only takes away our own peace of mind. So Mother said, don't see that. But then Mother said, but see your own faults. Now, that has definitely a lot of benefit. Because if we only stop looking at the faults of people and things outside of us, and rather turn our attention to our own selves, we might see that there is a lot that needs mending, that needs attention, that needs cleaning up within me. Because unless I look at my own faults, unless I become aware of my own faults, what chance have I of even correcting them? So before I correct my own faults, I must know what those faults are. And in order for me to know what those faults are, I must look at them. So that's first thing, that no fault finding is conditioned in the sense that don't see other people's faults, see your own faults. So that's first benefit. Looking at our own weaknesses. Again, when we look at ourselves, we will find both. There is no person in the world who can say or who will say, if they observe properly, that they have only faults or they have only good things. All of us are a mixture of good and bad. All of us are a mixture of strengths and weaknesses. The only person who is beyond this is one who is enlightened. One whose I sense in the body and mind has completely gone. But as long as we have a sense of identity with the body and mind, and if we care to look in our own heart, we will find both. There are a lot of things we are very good at. There are a lot of things we are very bad at. And there are a lot of things we are kind of average at. That's pretty much the story. Now, if we can look at ourselves and get as clear, as objective an assessment of these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, this is, I'm kind of okay. Then what we must do in life going forward becomes much easier, much clearer. All that we need to do then going forward is the strengths within us, the talents, the skills within us that we have identified, we must make sure that we don't lose them. So preserving our strengths. And if possible, developing them further. If I'm strong in something, let me become stronger. But the weaknesses that I've observed in me, I must say, what kind of changes I need to bring about in my way of thinking, in my way of doing things, in my way of relating myself to people around me, that will help remove those weaknesses. So once the weaknesses are identified, we should begin by trying to find a possible solution to those weaknesses. Now, that's the kind of work we need to do. It's not, in some sense, not very different by looking outside. For instance, your room. If you look at your room, if you don't care to put your room in order, then things are just going to lie about here and there and everywhere. But someday if you say, no, let me put my room in order. Let me see what are the things in my room that I need, that are good, that are important. What are the things in my room that I do not need, which are not important? If I can make that kind of a distinction, then get rid of the things that I don't need. The things that I need often that are important, I should put them in my reach so that I can find them quickly. Then living in that room becomes such a joy. Same thing happens in my heart as well. So the room I live in externally is a reflection of the room I live in internally. Because the mind that looks at the good and bad in my room outside is the same mind that looks at the good and bad in the room inside. The mind is not different. And therefore, if I am able to take good care of my external environment, then I just have to use that same psychology, that same approach, that same way of doing things to take care of my mind and make sure that all the good things that are there should be kept in the right place, because the good thing, the strengths that we have are our assets. They are of great help to us. As we march forward in life, we have to take decisions, meet people, carry out our duties. Our strengths are going to help us to do all that. So we have to preserve that strength. but also the weaknesses in the heart. If I can identify them, then I will try to find a way to eliminate them. So, look at your own faults, but not the fault of others. But when I say look at my own faults, it's not just what is in my heart, in my mind, important as it is. I should look even deeper. I should probe the depth of my own existence. And then we find that there are certain things in my existence as a human being which are problematic. Now, there are certain things within me which may be difficult to overcome, but still I can get rid of them. I can eliminate them if I strive hard. With the willpower, with perseverance, with grit, with determination, I will be able to eliminate most of my weaknesses if I persist, if I don't give up. But there are certain things in my own human situation which are problematic, but I or anyone for that matter can never get rid of them because they are a package. So my existence as a human being is a package. So there are a lot of beautiful, wonderful, hopeful things in our human experience, but there are also a lot of things which are not so interesting. In fact, which are quite problematic actually. And those are what Krishna describes here. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, Dukkha, Doshanu, Darshanam. So Janma, birth, Mrityu, death, Jara, sickness, Jara is aging, Vyadhi is disease or sickness, and Dukkha, the pain and sorrow that all of these produce. Now we might say, well, what sorrow will birth produce? Clearly, birth whenever there is birth, there's joy in the family. So don't associate birth with sorrow itself. But think about the baby. All of us were babies. There was a time all of us were born. It's just that we don't remember it. But books often describe, and any study of human anatomy and human biology makes it very clear that the process of birth is now no fun for the baby who is about to be born. To be encased for several months upside down in a very narrow space is no fun. It's like solitary confinement. Now we don't look at it that way. It just seems a very unpoetic, kind of a harsh way of looking at it. I understand that. But that's the reality. Maybe our mind is not developed fully at that stage. Otherwise, we would be just cursing right and left at our situation. Anyway, so no need to get into too many details, but we know it's not a very happy experience. Which is why perhaps the first thing that the baby does after being born is cry. So our entry into this world occurs with just crying. And as I have mentioned often, that if the baby doesn't cry immediately after birth, everyone is worried. And only when they hear the cry, it's like, oh, great, now there is a baby is born. So it's interesting that the sound of crying is often associated with the sign of life. Anyway, so this is just to understand why janma or birth is coupled here. Of course, the idea of, just as it's not always apparent why birth can be associated with dukkha or sorrow, sometimes we think that death is a little bit easier to associate it with dukkha or sorrow. But again, it's not any less problematic. Oftentimes, what creates pain for many people is not that event of death itself, but what happened before death, especially if it is preceded by what we will come, this old age and sickness. We know that as we age, the process of aging itself, when the kind of vitality and energy that we had in youth slowly begins to decrease, that the body, by no means perfect at any stage of our life, begins to manifest its imperfections more and more. It's a little bit like when you have a machine and you have used it for a long time, sometimes all the parts slowly kind of start coming apart. And this is a machine, and there are a lot of movable parts. If there were no movable parts, it probably could have lasted longer. But there are a lot of this. The other day, I was listening to a program on the human body, and I'd say there are like several billion neurons, several billion cells just in the brain alone. And each cell is a living entity. And then, of course, throughout the body, there are like gazillion, trillions of them. And so all of these are movable parts. So if things sometimes go wrong with the body, that's not a surprise, really. What is a surprise is that most of the time, most of the things in the body seem to go well, seem to work all right. That is a surprise. In fact, there is a verse in Sanskrit which says, even about death, what that verse says is that death, that people die, is not a surprise at all. What is a thing that we should wonder at is that people don't die for years together. And the example the verse gives is, if you have a container and you fill that container with water, and if that container has several holes, now if the water drips away from that container, and eventually the container becomes empty, that is not a surprise. Of course, it had holes all over. And of course, the water is not going to remain in that container for long. That's kind of obvious. But suppose, in spite of that, those holes in that container, if the water just stays there for days and days and days, then that would be a thing that we might feel, oh, that's a great mystery. And so this verse says, that is the situation with our body. That prana, the life force, that which animates our body and mind, that which keeps us going, that which gives us the strength to do not only physical actions but also mental activity. That prana can escape. There is a mouth, the ears, there are so many outlets that the body has. That prana can go anytime. It's not like it's all, even nowadays we are wearing masks, but otherwise we are talking and seeing and everything is, the prana could leave anytime. But it doesn't. It just stays there for years and years. So life is a mystery. Death is not a mystery at all. It's pretty obvious that one day, with so many outlets available, the prana is going to go away. Anyway, so a person who is suffering physically, intensely, when that person dies, and if that person has been good, then of course he's going to bring sorrow to others. But for that person itself, it's a great release. Freedom from this painful body. So there are different ways of looking at birth and death, which might look from one perspective something a joy, and another perspective sorrow, and same thing with regard to birth. But most importantly, to neither of these two we have any control. I don't remember, and I don't think any of us remembers that we were ever given a choice or a chance like, when would you like to be born? And where would you like to be born? In what circumstances would you like to be born? No one ever asked us that. We were just born. That's it. No choice. Death. We don't have any choice either. We might have our preferences about how we want to die, and we hope that through God's grace we will die the way we would want to die. But again, we don't have any guarantee that it will happen exactly that way. About aging, we know that's something that happens. That is exactly, we start aging from the day we were born. I mean, think about it. We just say, I'm 1 week old, I'm 4 weeks old, I'm 5 years old. Yeah, we are getting older every day, but we don't, up to a certain point in life, getting older is kind of considered with, it's a sense of joy. When a little child becomes a teenager, you get a sense of empowerment. There are a lot of things you can do. There are a lot of things you can think about. Even in youth, then slowly things begin to turn through middle age, and then kind of the graph goes down. So aging then begins to show that it has problems. Even mental vitality, let alone physical vitality, even mental vitality often seems to go down. And so aging has its own problems and own thing. And then, of course, sickness. We don't need to talk much about it. This is what we are seeing for more than 15 months now, in a very radical sort of way, the kind of devastation this pandemic has created. But even before the pandemic, it wasn't as if there was no illness or sickness. It just didn't happen all at once. It didn't happen in as radical a way as COVID has made us realize. But we know, no matter how much precaution we might take, it's impossible to keep the body completely fit, because the body is a defective product. Yes, God made it, but for whatever reason, it's not perfect. It is a material product, has to follow the laws of matter. And one of the things with matter is every composition presupposes a certain future decomposition. So that's just the way, just following laws of matter. Now, all of these cause sorrow and pain and suffering in one way or the other. So that is what Krishna is saying. Dukkha is pain, dosha, the defect, anudarshanam, looking at the defects of our human experience, expressed in these some cardinal turning points in our lives. There is birth at one end, death at the other, and in between there is this process of aging and sickness. Now, how will this lead to knowledge? It will lead to knowledge by, again, producing that detachment that is needed. The more I cling to things that are slipping between my fingers, all of my time and energy are being employed in something that I can't hold, something that I cannot keep. Now, once I know that this is defective, that yes, it doesn't mean I need to ignore them. It doesn't mean that I need to just trash them. Sure, I need to do the best I can to preserve them as long as I can. But while I'm doing that, I need to also employ a good part, a significant part of my time and energy in something that is not perishable, something that will be with me all the time. Now, what is it that will be with me all the time? Is there anything in life that will be with me all the time? And Gita says, there is only one thing that will be with me all the time, and that is me. Everything that is other than me can be taken away from me. It's pretty obvious, really. But me, no one can take me away from me. And so if I can focus my attention, use my time, my energy, my knowledge, my skill to focus on this me, the only entity that will be with me through eternity, that no power in the world can ever take away. So if I look at this me and say, what is this me? It's always going to be with me, it is me. So why should I fritter away my time and energy into things that are there with me only for a short time, that are slipping between my fingers even as I speak, that can be snatched away from me, that can be taken away from me, or those things that can go away on their own for one reason or another, in one way or another. But the only entity that can never go away is me. So look at that me, and that knowledge of that me, experience of that me, knowing me as I am, that is knowledge. So Krishna is describing here that a good, positive practice of fault finding is finding fault with life itself. That this life is so defective that it doesn't deserve all of my attention, all of my energy, all of my time. I can use it for something higher, something better, something that will be my eternal companion. And my eternal companion is me. Period. So that is the next thing that Krishna mentions here. The quality that will produce knowledge is to look at life itself, find its defects, and we know that once we know something is defective, something is worthless, something that is not going to be there for long, it becomes much easier then to withdraw oneself from that thing. As long as things have value, we can't let them go. It's not just because Krishna is saying, oh, think of God and don't think of this material world. It doesn't work. Doesn't work. We have people who have read spiritual books, have been reading it day after day, month after month, year after year. It won't work. Simply reading from books doesn't work. Unless and until I really reflect on it and say, why? Why should I not put my whole body, mind, soul into this world? Why do I have to think of God often where I do not even know whether God exists? And the reason is this is all perishable. None of this will remain. What will remain is this real truth, the reality. So that is why looking at the faults of this existence itself will lead to knowledge. Look at verse number 9. Asaktiranabhishvangaha putradaragrihadishu nityam cha samachittatvam ishtanishtopapatishu. Non-attachment, non-identification of self with son, daughter, spouse, home and the rest, and constant even-mindedness in the occurrence of the desirable and the undesirable. You can see that none of these are unconnected practices. They are all overlapping. So asaktihi, non-attachment. And we already seen this in the earlier verse, that attachment shows itself as I or mine. Saktihi is attachment. Asaktihi is non-attachment. So that non-attachment, in fact, that is the essential quality for Karma Yoga. In fact, the practice of Karma Yoga is precisely to develop or manifest that quality of detachment from our heart. And the best ideal we have for detachment is Krishna himself. In fact, many students of Gita feel that the central quality taught throughout the Gita is really detachment. You might remember Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the main teaching of the Gita is what happens when you repeat Gita 10 times. And the word 10 is not important. You can repeat it even 8 times or 11 times. That's fine. Like Gita, 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 Gita. So when you repeat it, it just feels like Tagi, Tagi. And Tyaga. Tyaga means letting go. So the central teaching of the Gita is letting go. We see, and the way Krishna's detachment stands out so boldly, so clearly. You see that right in the middle of the battlefield, these thousands of soldiers on both sides, and everyone is raring to go. A place where very soon there's going to be violence, there's going to be death, destruction, there's going to be chaos. And in the midst of that, you have this figure of Krishna. In the midst of that scenario, Krishna stands with these reins of the horses in his hand, with a smile on his face, and his whole being filled with peace, filled with contentment. Now that's such a total contrast. Sometimes you see some movie or a TV serial which is like filled with gore and violence and killing. Even if you're just sitting comfortably on your couch and in your sofa and watching the kind of a violent program, you just feel, you get agitated. Just even though what's happening is just on the screen. But right there, now in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, it's not a TV program. That's actually, things are happening right there. And in the midst of that, Krishna stands there. What a amazing picture. Someone with so much at peace, so much at calm. Now that's the ideal. Now on our daily experience, for most of us, we are not in any way close to the battlefield experience of Kurukshetra. Yes, there are smaller and bigger battles going on all the time within the family, at the workplace, and at various levels. But it doesn't come anywhere close to what was there in Kurukshetra. But remember this image of Krishna on your face. During these hard and soft battles that we have to fight on a daily basis, with people, with things, with our own selves, in the midst of all those battles, can I make an effort to smile, to be peaceful, to be calm? If I can do that, then I have really imbibed the essence of the Gita. You don't need to read anything, don't need to study anything. During these daily battles that we have with ourselves and with the things around, if I can hold my peace, hold my calm, and have the courage to smile, even though it may be difficult to smile in many situations, if I can do that, I think more than half, or probably even 80% of the problems will just be solved without me not having to do anything other than just being calm, just being peaceful, just be without reacting strongly. We don't have to do anything, just be like this. That is what Krishna says. And that is what is meant by asakti. That is true detachment. It's not about cutting ourselves off from other people. It's not about like closing the doors and windows and just remaining by yourself. That's not the point. The point is, yes, even in the middle of the battle, can I still be calm? And the beauty is this: if I can manage to remain calm and peaceful, I will be able to find an easy solution to most of the problems we have in daily life. In fact, there is no problem in this world which doesn't have a solution. Every problem has a solution. And at some level, every problem is rather simple. If we look at the problem with a calm mind, with a peaceful mind, then we can go to the heart of the problem. And if you go to the heart of the problem, it's usually pretty simple. So once we know that, the solution to that problem is also very obvious and not that complicated. But because we don't look at the problem in a calm way, in a peaceful way, that which is simple appears very complicated. And because it appears very complicated, we try to find a complicated solution to what appears as a complicated problem. And of course, it usually doesn't work. Or if it works, it's very temporary. But with a calm mind, what appears complicated may not appear so complicated. And I might be able to find an easy solution, a solution that really works and is more lasting. So detachment. So that is detachment. Next, anabhishvangaha putradara grahadishu. So anabhishvangaha is a special kind of attachment. It's not so non-identification. Abhishvangaha. Abhishvanga means to identify with something totally. To the point that sometimes that which is mine begins to appear as me. It does happen. It's like, let's say, think about a person, maybe someone who has a business somewhere, and the next day, this person goes and find where this business was located, that house is on fire. Or maybe it just collapsed. We're just grappling with this enormous tragedy that occurred in Miami. Many of you are aware of how this whole complex, this entire 13-story building just collapsed. And still, I think probably more than 150 people are still unaccounted for. It's a devastation. So something like that could happen to a person, and that devastation can cut so close to heart that at that moment it doesn't feel like something of mine has gone. It might feel like I am ruined, I am gone. So that is what Abhishvangaha means, that identifying something so totally. In fact, the Upanishads sometimes say that our children are sometimes become, although we speak about that as my son, my daughter, my children. So at one level, yes, they are mine. But at another level, children sometimes become an extension of one's own self. Many parents begin to see their children as an extension of their self. And there are, of course, many kind of instances when we find that the kind of things the parents were not able to do themselves, they hope that somehow those things can be done by their children. It's almost like vicariously achieving something that I wasn't able to achieve in this body, in my life. with the hope that my children will be able to do it. So children at that way of thinking become an extension of one's own self. In fact, books say that children are seen as a kind of a secondary or kind of a secondary form of immortality, a recognition at some level that I'm mortal, that I'm going to die one day. But in some form, because I see my own reflection in my child, I will somehow continue to live in this world through my children. And so this kind of an identification can occur with one's own family, with one's spouse, one's children, one's own home, one business. It can really go. It can sometimes happen with, even if someone is not, there is no blood relation, but there could be people in our lives whom we are not related, but who are so close to us that we identify with them completely. So that is called abhishwanga. Now that kind of identifying with all these things which are mine, and identifying with them so strongly as to see one's own self in them, takes me away from knowledge. Think about it this way. Right now, my I has already extended itself to the body, mind, and ego. And what the Gita is trying to do is to make me see that I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the ego, I am this Atman. So instead of letting go of the layers that already exist, this abhishwangaha literally means I'm adding more layers. So it's not just my body, mind, and ego, but it's also my family, my children, my friends, my this. So my this false I, or the layers over the I, are becoming more and more. So instead of them getting reduced, instead of them becoming less, they're actually becoming more. And that's why this will lead to ignorance. And that's why Krishna says, anabhishwanga, the opposite of that, non-identifying with it. Now, important, non-identifying is very different from not caring. In fact, sometimes we could get attached by this sense of I to such a way that we may neglect our duties and responsibilities in life. And that will create a different kind of attachment. And so this is important. So non-identifying is not to be confused with not caring or not loving. And as we have seen often, that love and attachment are actually opposite. The more attached I am, the less I can love. The more detached I am, the more I can love. I know it sounds paradoxical, but that's the reality. So the more I stop identifying as I, the more I'll be able to love my family, my children, my spouse, my friend. I'll be able to love them more when I stop attaching to them. Because you see, the obstacle to love is ownership, is possession. But with detachment, I learn to give freedom. I respect my own freedom. I respect the freedom of everyone around me. And it's through that freedom real love sprouts. And so non-identification with all of these really means an opportunity to love them all truly and unreservedly. So this is important. And then finally, Krishna says, Nityam cha samachittatvam ishta anishta upapattishu. Nityam, ever. Samachittatvam, being even-minded in Ishta and Anishta. So there are things happening in our life which are favorable. There are things happening in our life which are unfavorable. There are things which are good. There are things which are bad. There are things that make us happy. There are things that bring a lot of sorrow to us. This is happening all the time in everyone's life. No one is an exception. But what often happens is we just go back and forth. When something is favorable, something is good, something hopeful, something desirable, we become happy. And its opposite, we become unhappy. Now, what lead me to knowledge, lead me to jnana is, can I be a witness to all of these things happening in my life? And samachittatvam, can I be even-minded? Now, this doesn't mean that I should just have a poker face and say, that's nothing. I don't have to be happy, I don't have to be miserable. That's not the intent. Of course, when good things happen, I'm going to smile, I'm going to be happy. And being happy is not a crime. And if there are things which are painful, of course I'm going to feel sad. Of course there are things which are going to make me sad. So that's fine. But samachittatva means to know that all of these are passing things in life. None of these remain for long. That to feel happy and miserable is understandable, but not to the point that both my happiness or my misery overwhelm me to a point that I become incapable of myself, incapable of knowing what to do. I'm just overpowered by either my joy or my sorrow. And once I'm overpowered by them, they control me. I have no control over myself. And if I have lost control over myself, I'm not myself anymore. That is the state of ignorance. So as long as I'm happy and miserable, but still myself, still have them within my control, then I'm good. The analogy that I like very much is when you sit by a window and you see these clouds passing by. If you have a good view of the sky from your window, and you see, sometimes there'll be fewer clouds, sometimes there may be more. Sometimes the clouds may be, if they are reflecting the sun, they could be like shining and very attractive. You'll find some beautiful forms the clouds can make. Or sometimes the clouds can be pretty fierce. They can be very dark, and there'll be thunder and lightning. And as you sit by your window and watch these clouds pass by, and in different seasons of the year, the formation and the size and the sound of these clouds may change, you know that none of them remains constant. You look out of your window once every few hours, and you find that the scenario in the sky has changed, the color has changed, the clouds have changed, the shapes have changed, everything has changed. And so, even when then we see some dark, fierce cloud, thunder, which doesn't make us happy, we know that very soon this will also pass away. And then next time you have some bright, sunny, beautiful cloud, which is like golden in color, which makes your heart leap with joy. You can enjoy that, but also know even that is not going to be there all the time. So long as we are aware of impermanence of everything, then, as Krishna says here, we'll be able to hold our balance. Samachittatvam, even-mindedness. So the quality of even-mindedness is an important quality for the cultivation of knowledge. So we'll stop here now. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme tayo shritva pranamami muhurmuhu. So we'll have a 5-minute break, and then if you have any comments, thoughts, questions, we can take a look at it after 5 minutes. Drink in these 5 minutes. Let's look at the questions. Is love eternal, or is love a material object? Love is always eternal. That is why we say God is love. And as I explained, that true love is always present in our heart. It's not something that needs to be acquired. One way of understanding that is, the more all hatred or anger or bias or prejudice is removed from the heart, that love will automatically manifest itself. The other obstruction to that love is just this particularized attachment to things. So the more the attachment, less the love. And so the two are opposites in that way. So love, yes, love, as you mentioned here, love that we feel for near and dear ones has a permanence. Yes. So love is always eternal. It is attachment that has its ebb and flow. There are sometimes we say, sometimes we hear people say, oh, I don't love you anymore. When we might use the word love, but it is really attachment. Because it's only attachment that can sometimes increase, sometimes decrease, sometimes it feels like we can withdraw it altogether. But love isn't like that. Love is eternal. Love is not something that I can choose to love and not choose to love. Love is something that is already always there. So yes, it is eternal. Next. When Krishna says to think only of me in everyday language, that conjures images of selfishness and egotism, but he means the opposite. How do we retrain our minds to see the truth? Clearly, yes. And that is why it's helpful to know that when Krishna says me, why is that different than when I use the word me? And the reason is simple. My me, my sense of I, is attached or connected with his body and mind. When Krishna says me, Krishna's sense of I is not attached to Krishna's body and mind, but in fact to the spirit, to the Atman, which is the same in everyone. So Krishna's I is an all-encompassing, eternal I, which is present in the hearts of all. So when Krishna says, therefore, think of me, be devoted to me, what he really means is think of the eternal, think of the all-pervading reality, think of God who is present in the heart of all. And because of that, it might superficially appear as a very egoistic statement, but in reality, it is not. Next. Looks like tremendous forbearance and patience is a key outcome of Advaita knowledge, learning from Holy Mother's life. Can prayer to God for titiksha ultimately lead us to this goal? Titiksha is an important quality necessary in spiritual life. But forbearing Titiksha in the real sense of the term comes along with knowledge. Titiksha is not just kind of gritting your teeth and just bearing everything stoically. Titiksha, and in Shankaracharya Viveka Chudamani, he says that titiksha, forbearance, in the real sense of the term, means bearing all difficulties, all pain, all sorrow, without complaining, without any sort of a grievance, without any sense of retaliation. It's almost like being strong enough to absorb all the pain and sorrow without reacting to it. And once we are able to forbear in that way, we are very close to enlightenment. Next, it is said that whatever happens is for our good. Is it good to reflect on understanding what the good may be when something bad happens? Now, whatever happens is for our good. I would qualify that statement by saying that whatever happens is good for our, whatever happens is for our good, provided we reflect over everything that happens. So yes, the second part of your question is the right answer. Is it good to reflect on our understanding? Yes. So reflect on everything that happens in life, good or bad, and then the result of that reflection, the benefit of that reflection will be, it will lead to a good result. So it's not just the thing happening that is making it good, but your reflection on that thing will lead to something that will benefit you ultimately. And therefore, it's a good advice to say, whatever happens in life, reflect over it before reacting to it. And if possible, don't react to it. That's what forbearance really means. So learn. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, as long as I live, so long do I learn. And the best way to learn is everything that happens in our life, reflect. And then learn, and then grow. Because that's the only way to become enlightened. Swami Vivekananda says in his Karma Yoga lectures, he says that for a Karma Yogi, every moment of a Karma Yogi's life must be an opportunity for an awakening, for enlightenment. So, every moment we could be learning something. At the very least, that every moment thing can come at some point in our life. But right now, the least we can do is say, every encounter I have with every person I meet throughout the day, let me know or reflect over everything that happens through my work, through the people I meet. And it may not always be possible to do it like instantly at that moment, but at the very least, every night before going to bed, if we go through every activity that occurred in the course of the day, the people that we met, and then see, what have I learned today? Have I learned anything new today? So only if, on some day, if you find that whole day has passed and I have not learned anything new, then you can truly say, well, today is really wasted. But if you have learned something, no matter how trivial, but if something new, you are growing, then that day is not wasted. That is what Sri Ramakrishna meant when he said, as long as I live, so long do I learn. We don't stop being students when we graduate from our schools. At some level, we should all continue to remain students of life. Because as long as we have that part of us feeling that I'm a student, we will learn. We'll continue to learn. The moment you feel, oh, I don't have anything to learn, I know everything, yes, your education has stopped then. Then we won't grow after that. Next. I'm intrigued by what you said, that the more detached one is, the better one can love. In worldly love, it seems the more attached one is, there seems to be more love. Yes, as I said, we may use the word love, but oftentimes it is just attachment. So, the phrase worldly love really means just attachment. Because love itself, in its truest form, is divine. So there is no such thing as worldly love. Yeah, so it's just the words that we use. And so it's good to know. We have to be a little bit careful. We don't have to kind of devalue the word love so much. And that's a problem really, because everyone kind of uses the word love all the time. It just loses all its meaning after some time. So again, I'm not saying you stop using the word love. That's not my suggestion. But just do whatever everybody does. But deep in your heart, be aware of the distinction between attachment and love. And be aware, as a spiritual seeker, that love is something truly divine. That any connection I make in life, without bringing God into the picture, any relationship that I develop, without the eternal, without the divine being a part of that equation, is attachment. So whatever connection I have, not just with people, but with things, with places, everything in this world, so long as I establish that connection through God, I'm on a stronger foundation. And therefore, what the spiritual seekers do is look upon their family, friends, possession as God's gift to them. That they all really belong to God, that God has entrusted them in your care. So you love them, you take care of them because you love God and God has given it to you. So somehow we need to find a way to involve God into all of our dealings with the world. That will protect us. But if anything, we say, well, God has no place in this, then that could lead to problems. Next, it seems that turning to God leads us from attachment to the unreal to surrender to the real. Leads from attachment to the unreal to surrender to the real. But how to learn to turn to God in the midst of attachment or anger or lack of serenity? Well, that's the whole challenge, isn't it? That yes, we have all these attachment, we have anger, but there's also this little voice within us. Sometimes people call it the voice of conscience. There is some part of our mind which wants to take us in the right direction. And sure, there are other parts of the mind which are filled with this attachment, anger, lack of serenity and all of that. So that's the inner battle. And so then the question is, who do I listen to? That's where discernment or viveka comes in. Do I listen to these parts of me that are drawing me towards this perishable world? Or do I listen to that still small voice somewhere in the corner of my heart that is saying, do the right thing, pray, meditate, turn to God? So much depends on who I listen to. There are these two, think about them as two advisors. People in positions of power, whether it's the president of the country or whoever, they cannot and they do not generally decide everything by themselves. The problems are so multifarious, they usually have advisors around them, whose experts around them, whose advice they listen to. And ultimately, of course, the decision they have to take. Now, whose advice they listen to and accept makes all the difference. Sometimes it could be difficult. Sometimes it will be a one advisor advising the president, let's say, it's like, this is the right thing to do. And then another one said, this is the right thing to do. And the one who had that ability to take decisions has to choose between the two. And what choice that person makes can be devastating in some cases, can change a lot of things. And that's exactly what's happening within us. We are the president of this body-mind complex. So every one of us is already a president in some ways. And we have all these advisors. Our mind itself has split itself into these multiple advisors. So part of the mind says, do this. A part of the mind says, here is this Red Sox game. Go and watch the TV. That's the right thing to do. The other part of the mind said, no, this is the time for meditation. Go and meditate. Now, which advisor will I listen to? That's the thing. And so, yes, if I listen to the right advisor, then it will be possible for me to surrender to that real, even when that attachment to the unreal is drawing me. So I need to listen to the right advisor. And that listening to the right advisor will become possible the more I'm able to remain calm and peaceful and contented, the way Krishna wanted us to, samachittatvam, even-minded, not getting carried away by the ups and downs of life. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all these questions. We come to the end of today's satsang, and we will, next week is July 4th. So we will not meet next Sunday, so that all of you can celebrate July 4th as best you can, in whichever way it's possible. It may be this July 4th, we'll be able to celebrate in a little bit more easier way than it may have been possible last year. So have a good July 4th celebration. And so we will meet after now 15 days. So not next Sunday, we'll meet a Sunday after that. Let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us.